Leslie and I have known each other since early childhood. We grew up on the same country road in Mississippi.
I think why we're good for the community of Mississippi is because we're a product of this community. We are just two country guys, and we were embedded with what I call the diamonds of good character.
Come, join the family, and help us build the community.
Charles. What's going on, my brother?
How you doing, Leslie?
Hey, man, I'm well. It's another Friday. We've been blessed to see it.
Indeed, sir.
Well.
Indeed.
Oh, it's Reconstruction Day.
Yeah. How appropriate.
Very much so. Very appropriate. You know what? Let's just get right into it. I'm gonna let you drive the ship today. Let's get right in.
Some of you may be wondering why we picked Reconstruction in South Carolina. For a lot of our viewership, we are Black and proud. We are small business owners. We're a community that's unified. We're inclusive. And after the Emancipation Proclamation and the fall of slavery, everyone wasn't free. And I think Leslie talked about that on Juneteenth, the significance of it. You had a lot of people in the South Carolina region, down in Moncks Corner and other parts of South Carolina. They wanted more. And I suspect that was the overriding feeling all across the South. They wanted more. They had learned to read and write in secret because reading and writing was a offense punishable by death. But they learned that largely through the church and small family gatherings, even though their families had been torn apart and pieces of the family sold to other plantations. So we arrived in South Carolina, and slavery is gone, and we're in a period of reconstructing the Union. Anybody who's ever been to South Carolina or from South Carolina knows South Carolina has very strong views when it comes to race relations. And
that's putting it mildly.
Yeah, and so even to the point of it being codified into the Black codes, but that's jumping ahead. The significance for us is we've been talking for several months about race, class, money, and what that means to the community and how we circulate Black dollars. Well, at one point in South Carolina, did you know, Leslie, the Black South Carolinians, they got together and they said, now that we're free, we want to be in office. and did they? And that's why I focused on it. I'm going to talk about a larger point related to Reconstruction, but I want you to focus on the political power of the Black community in South Carolina. In the state legislature, at one point in time during Reconstruction, they had 124 seats in the state legislature, and 71 to 74 of those seats were held by freed Black men, former slaves. Let that sink in for a minute. In a time, in a climate, and in an attitudinal space where, no, that's not happening. They made it happen. They were active in business. They knew agriculture really, really well from years and years of enslavement. That's what they did. And so they took that knowledge and they started getting into textiles, namely cotton. Then they started getting into banking and finance and educating their own. Well, wouldn't you know?
Go ahead. Hey, I don't see no reason why you should hold back.
Well,
You
I
go
mean,
ahead.
it's not so
I
much.
think it's just
It's not so much holding back. It's just I'm giving the high points just because I think about it often that we had a true seat of power in these United States right there in the South, in a stronghold of the South. You know, and we couldn't hold it because when they realized what was happening around them, they changed the Constitution. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. The last time ties us on back to present day, June 26, 2020, and what we're facing in Mississippi. Reconstruction and the tearing down of Reconstruction became a Confederate want, a unified front to oppress Black men. And I keep saying Black men, you know why? Because at that point, women were not really in the mix. They have done what they've done all the time back then. They educated, they led the household, and their ideas were the ideas that were on the floor, but they were not recognized member of the body politic. And so that's why I keep saying free men. Was it right? No, we know it wasn't right. And we know out of that, you went from slavery to Reconstruction to Jim Crow.
well, and the Black Code in between that.
Well, the Black Code is the genesis of Jim Crow.
Right. It's the origination point of Jim Crow.
Yeah, the Confederate leadership, which one of our dear friends always points out that they lost. So why did they have so much power? Well, there is probably a little known fact that even though in losing, they retreated, they never surrendered.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they did a formal surrender, but in their minds, it's still going on today. And that's why I said June 26, 2020, because while they were enacting black codes in South Carolina, wouldn't you know, in 1894, black codes were 1895 in South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. But in 1894, Mississippi was getting a new flag.
Oh, I was wondering if you were going to hit on that. How ironic and how timely.
Yeah. So any of you who follow me on Facebook, you know I've been using the hashtag downward pressure, because from 1894 to today, we have been under the Confederate battle flag as that was woven into the tapestry of Mississippi. So
let me because I know that's a big debate now. Let me play devil's advocate a little bit and say, what do you say to the people that have the viewpoint and they have a right to have it? We all do. It's their viewpoint that they have with the flag. The flag doesn't mean anything anyway, and it's not going to change anything. So why do we worry about it?
Fair point. What I would say to that is symbols carry meaning, and oftentimes duality of meaning. A lot of the people who are in favor of maintaining the Mississippi flag are for status quo, i.e. states' rights. If you have studied or you have a mama like mine or then you know states' rights is code for holding Black Americans down. It is the policy prescription for systematic racism. You often hear the term systematic racism. Well, this is pretty much the second iteration of systematic racism. First was very literal, systematic racism, in that you had a group of citizens who were enslaved, brought here by force, sold, beaten, made to work as servants to another ethnic group. The second iteration comes when you codify those things into states' law, i.e. states' rights. And so that's where the importance of the flag comes from. It must come down because it is the embodiment of separate treatment, unfair treatment, racism. You'll hear arguments from the likes of Senator Chris McDaniel and others who say it's our heritage. Heritage is, when used in that context, Leslie, it is synonymous with bigotry, racism. All the people who came before us, our ancestors, who lived through tyranny and fear of lynching, killing, beating, stabbing. Think about Emmett Till.
Right.
Think about Medgar Evers. Think about Vernon Dahmer.
And the list goes on. So, you know, it makes me come to the realization on the thought process of, let's give some real contextual meaning to the word freedom and what that really means. And I think if we look throughout history and we reflect on our current times, freedom, the meaning of freedom is, it has no meaning without action. Because you're on a continuous journey to stay free. And as a Black American, you're in a continuous journey to be free. And so we have two different courses here. So I had this discussion, I shared with white friends of mine and friends of different races. Here's the thing, it's a different path, it's a different trajectory. And so, you know, the X coordinate and the Y coordinate are not confused about where they live and where they reside. They know what they do. One is horizontal, one is vertical. They may intersect at points, but they will never coexist for a long period of time. I think the reality is, when I look at, you know, when I look at Juneteenth that we celebrated last week, I look at Reconstruction, what I've seen, you know, the Jim Crow, the Black Code initially in South Carolina, it was called, the origin of Jim Crow. That was in the 1890s. It didn't make its way and get adapted and roll all over the southern part of the United States to the 1950s. So when we say that heritage and history does not continue, then it does, because just like that flag and that rhetoric followed from the 1890s, it continued and didn't even ignite into the 1950s in another place, because the messaging is still there. The meaning is still there. So I think we have to look at it from a broader lens than it's just my heritage, because if that was the case, to that same person, just as a counter argument, I would say, if my heritage, and this is just going to be straight to the point because I'm trying to make a point with this, but if my heritage caused you harm, would my heritage be okay?
No.
And so if the question to that is no, then that's my same response to your heritage. Heritage can't supersede decency and humanity. It can't. And so when it does, then we have a form of slavery. And so I think, although the Emancipation Proclamation dismissed slavery as we knew it at that time, slavery just modified and has warped in different styles, forms, and fashions, and has continued on. So just the thought process to put out there. I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, and I want to back up a second, because I think on June 26, 2020, when we're on the precipice of having a new flag in Mississippi, I think it's important to reflect back on this. We talk about Black codes and state rights and what happened during Reconstruction. One of the things that happened when the Confederate government fell is that they never stopped communicating. And the sons and daughters of the Confederacy began to write songs and books and ways to integrate their thought process into America as a whole. And that is where the monuments that you see that are coming down today in 2020, those are not up by accident. Those were put up during that 1890 period as a part of breaking Reconstruction to say that the boot heel is still in place. As a matter of fact, one of the designers of the Confederate flag, since we're talking about heritage, his quote, not mine, is that flag is a reflection of a superior white race and the inferiority of the blacks. So if that is the thought process that is related to the Confederate flag, which was then integrated into the Mississippi state flag blatantly in 1894, then what is an educated person, regardless of color, ethnicity, sexual orientation, supposed to draw as the conclusion of its meaning?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you guys join the conversation is the point of dialogue. I was reading a quote from Jane Fonda that was in breaking news she made this week, and it was interesting. She said, and a lot of people were in an uproar, but she said even the poorest of whites by financial means in terms still have privilege. And I had to go back and read that again because I didn't really understand what she was saying. I wanted to make sure I was getting the proper context of what she was saying. I think what you're saying, speaking to heritage, is that if you put education is powerful. And so ideologies or thought processes or anything that's passed down and trained that's repetitive is powerful. Mm-hmm. We all inherit the things that we come up in our environment. Now, where we're supposed to broaden ourselves is as we're enlightened and educated and we become more aware of the broader view, then our views are supposed to evolve.
Very much so.
I think what has happened sometimes we've just failed to evolve.
Well, so I'm going to challenge you right there.
Okay, let's go for it.
I'm going to challenge you right there because education in the South and largely in the North, in our formative years, when we talked about Reconstruction, it dealt with the industrialization of cotton, the economics and finance and commerce of coming out of slavery. Right. It left out whole bloody chapters of the significance of the push for blackface, the push for the integration of symbols and monuments. None of that was included in the curriculum. None of it. So when you say educate yourself, you have to move beyond what you learned in your formative years and continue to expand. That's where the evolution comes in at. Because if you look at, I can go down the list right now. Yep. North Carolina has the Confederate symbols in their flag. Alabama, Arkansas. Mississippi is more blatant than anybody because they got it right there in the corner. You go across the South, and the losing army and their ideology is in place as a blatant form of systematic racism. The monuments are there as edifices of holding a race down. That means when you talk about inequality for all, let's call it what it is. It's systematic. And so if you don't fall into that thought process, and the thing that amazes me about this conversation is in 2020, there are people still saying, well, it's my heritage, it's my right. It is not your right to want to hold anyone down. You weren't even born then.
Yeah. So, but when I say education, and I'm not talking about just formal education because that's limited, that's contained. What I'm speaking of, and it's different. And we got a generation now that's a little bit different because When we grew up, Charles, we didn't have the internet. We had encyclopedias. So, but when we arrived at college, for me, in a lot of ways, my education truly began. And so, because now I was able to read, I was beyond the scope of what I knew. I was in a much different, broader environment in terms of learning. And it does allow you to evolve and think differently. And so I think all of us, all people have to evolve and think differently. When we hold on to what my concept that if you're still thinking the same way you thought when you were in middle school or high school, you have failed to evolve.
I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think sometimes I bring that up though, Leslie, because our conversations get limited by what we know. And so the challenge here is for people to go and dig a couple layers deeper and find out what that heritage word means. What's the true context for it? Because there was a whole plan in place to use those symbols as symbols of fear and terror. Because if you've just think about this, your daughter, my sons, they'll never know the fear that those slaves lived under. They can only read about it. But if you see that symbol and you're coming out of slavery and you thought you were free, and then all of the constitutions got rewritten again to include laws that taxed you when you tried to go and vote and exercise your franchise. If they beat you for trying to vote or trying to run for office, then the world was a much, much scarier place.
Yeah, no doubt. So switching gears just a little bit, I noticed that when we look at what they did in South Carolina, particularly in terms of restructuring, you brought up a couple key points I want to make sure we hit. Number one, you said they were intentional about action. And I always say this. I said, you can be the most educated person in the world. Knowledge doesn't give you power. Only applied knowledge. So you still have to apply it. You have to apply it. I always tell people knowing the right thing to do and doing the right things are two totally different things that have two totally different outcomes. So you have to apply it. So when I look at what they did, we are not doing that now. Do you understand? You said how many people you said was in South Carolina's legislature?
124.
124, 71 to 74 African Americans coming out of slavery post Emancipation Proclamation. Are you kidding me?
Not only that, you had one 3-term black member of the House of Representatives representing South Carolina, if you can believe it.
So here's my question. If we look at the states today, and I don't know if you've done this research or not, what's the closest state we have to duplicate those types of numbers today? Anybody close?
Today?
Yes. Just had to ask.
Well, I mean, if you look at across the South, even in the midst of this flag debate here in Mississippi, every statewide elected official that's in on those decisions is Republican. You have Mike Espy, who is a candidate for the United States Senate. When he wins, he'll be the first African-American black senator from the state of Mississippi since Reconstruction. So, even though we're talking about history, it's alive and well right now.
So I always talk about, using the past to help you move more effective in current times. What do we take from Reconstruction? What can we take from Reconstruction to make us more effective today, to make us better people, to make us more effective? What lessons learned can we apply to better impact what's going on right now in our present time?
Well, a couple things, and this is my opinion of studying history. They were intentional about buying land. What they didn't understand was when they acquired those large tracts of land is that they didn't protect them by writing wills and making it generational. And so a large part of the disguise of the black codes was to take back that land and strip thousands and thousands, well, millions of acres, if we're talking about the entire South, away from those farmers who had acquired land out of slavery. Prices for land were very different then, and they had been very savvy in how they acquired those tracts of land, usually looking for land that nobody wanted, which was on the river or some tributary or on the ocean, swamps, those type things that later became tourist traps. So they're worth billions and billions of dollars. And
so give an example of one of those places that if we would have looked at it, it's hot and it's busy, it's the happening place today, but if we would have looked at it in the times they bought it, would have been like, no.
I mean, a lot of the coastal areas of South Carolina.
Yeah. Like the whole Myrtle Beach area, I think, for a lot.
Yeah. I mean, you know, those were held largely by black families. And they didn't write wills. So how does it become relevant? How do we correct that? Get yourself a will or a trust or something that you can leave your children what you've acquired. You work really hard to get it. Don't let somebody take it because it becomes heir property and they know how to work within the legal system much better than you do. The other thing, they were not afraid. They were not, even in the midst of terror, they were not afraid to put voice to wanting to do better and be better. Not necessarily for themselves, but for the next generation that was coming. And they pooled their resources.
Well, guys, family, chime in. I'm interested to hear all viewpoints on this. This is obviously sharing a lot. This is a very broad topic. We're just trying to give you the basis of Reconstruction because there's some things I just didn't know. But when we look, the point of this is to inspire us all. So at a time, and we take a group of people that are coming out of the most horrific experience one can go through, and they come out with the plan, and they come out with execution, and they drive results. And I look at our current time, and we have none of that. So there's lessons to be learned. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments. Cinnamon, we get you on. I promised I would love to get one of you to join us and talk about this. So come on, post your comments. I get them up on the screen and let's talk about it. Don't be quiet. I know it's a subject. For some, it evokes some tough feelings, some tough emotions.
Okay, so let's talk about that while they're getting their questions together.
Okay.
Why is it a tough subject? It is a tough subject because the subjugators have told us that racism is a bad topic. But if you look at this from the lens of Dr. Sean Abram, who is a very close friend of ours, racism, the symbolism, the strain of the flag is a public health issue. Diabetes, high blood pressure, all the things that ail our community can be tied back to this slavery, Jim Crow.
Yeah.
Because you had to eat what you had to eat. And
right.
Now that we are in a situation where we got better economics, better grocery stores, even now in 2020 in our
but do we? Because we still have major food deserts in all of our major cities throughout the country.
That's what I was about to say.
Here where I reside in Dallas, it's a tale of two cities. Yes. Everybody that lives here knows it. There's north and there's south. They're two very different realities. And so there's the suburbs, which is a different reality. And so not everybody, so if you can't afford to get to the suburbs or to one of those triggered areas that is where you have all those things, you're in a food desert. So
brother.
So here's what I mean when I say food deserts, because I know sometimes I get the question, what do you mean? So when I say food desert, most of us, when we decided to pick the place that we decided to live, we made sure there were our common necessities and things we needed, that there were things close by. With the exception of my friend Antonio, who likes to live as far away from civilization as possible with snakes and stuff. But other than that, we usually want those modern convenience. We look at, how are there grocery stores close by? Is there a variety of grocery stores? What are the restaurants close by? Are there hospitals? We look for fire stations, all the necessities and things that we know that we need in life. If you're in a food desert, your grocery store is the corner store. Now let me
go further than that, because corner store is a generalization.
All right, so let me break it down. Yeah, you're right, because you might, depending on how you view the corner store, your corner store might be the neighborhood Walmart. No, that's not the corner store. So let's break down what we're talking about in terms of corner store. Charles, take it from there and go deeper into that corner store analogy.
So if you think about how a city or a town is laid out, it's in concentric circles. You want to be in walking distance of fresh produce, good drinking water. You want to have access to fire and police for safety, not terror. You want to have clean and decent housing. Well, over the course of generations in the Black community, because of redlining and other nasty terms, where you mentioned suburbs, so now you got me off on this. I'm going from Reconstruction to to something else. But the point being, the separation by class. The more money, the more access you have to those basic good necessities, not dehydrated, fat saturated Twinkies, but fresh apples, fresh oranges, greens. What the lady say on the song, greens, beans, tomatoes, ham, you name it. All of that stuff is fresh. If it's not fresh, then you're in a desert where you're living beyond the Thunderdome. And usually, if you look back into the height of desegregation, you can go and find the train track and you can see where the food desert starts. So sure. the difference in the stores is going to be dramatic, because they're going to have the freshest, the newest, the most healthy. Those stores in the food desert are going to have a lot of processed meats in cans. They're going to have a lot of potato chips soaked in fat. They're going to have Twinkies and Ho-Hos and donuts.
All the stuff I like, but all the stuff that's not good for me.
Exactly. So while this conversation is
wide, let's go deeper. Now, watch this. Let's go deeper. So when we talk about healthcare and proactive healthcare, where we're not using the ER as a doctor's office, right? Because the ER in a lot of these communities is all they have. So now we get into, when you talk about the things that Dr. Abram talks about with diabetes and hypertension and all those things. Well, number one, if you're not getting to the doctor and you don't have the means to have proactive care, now you're not in a position to manage those things, because you're not detecting things early. You're reacting to, as opposed to treating. There's a very big difference in proactive healthcare and reactive healthcare, and you can look at it plain and simple by the mortality rates. And so if I don't have, now watch this, it gets even tougher. Then if we get into transportation, education, like when I kind of broke this down a little bit in inequality for all, school districts, a huge part of their budgets come from millage, which is based off property taxes. If you're in a huge food desert, most of that property is depressed, right? So you're not getting high tax revenue. So that's what's funding your schools. So your schools are not adequately funded either.
Yeah.
So it gets compounded, and then the compound gets compounded again. And so at the end of the day, I tell people it's like having a sticker price of $24,000 for a car, but if you got bad credit, by the time you finance and do all that, you're gonna pay $50,000 for that $24,000 car.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we are. The price of freedom. We've got to learn a lesson and take action and be decisive about it, but we've got to work together to make sure we eliminate those things as much as possible.
Yeah. And so not to get too far away from the topic of the day, which is Reconstruction. I hope all of you can see how those lines run from the end of slavery right to 5:08 Central Standard Time on June 26, 2020. The difference that I see right now and why I am optimistic that we will have a new flag very soon is that the institutional part of the government, the universities, people have started to realize, and it's not necessarily the leadership that has come to this realization. It is our young activists, like my niece, like Kylan Hill, who plays at Mississippi State, who's a running back, who said he refuses to play another down until they take the flag down because it is offensive. They've started to see the power that they have in their collective voice. And so when their coach, who stands to have his job in jeopardy if he don't have a star running back, hears this, and then he realizes that may be the sentiment of my locker room, I got to go down to the state capitol and let them know that I'm with my player. You know?
Right. No, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And I think, you know, as we have these discussions and we talk about, all we're doing is really educating. It's really having a conversation about the past history. And then we're supposed to take history, and history is supposed to make us better because it gives us lessons to allow us not to repeat some of the mistakes in history, but to capitalize on the things that they got right. But if we're not revisiting history and if we're not absorbing history, then we can't get better because we don't benefit from learning from the history. And so this is why we take time to have these conversations. This is why we take time to come to you every Friday with things of substance that we can talk about, because somebody has to start this dialogue. And the reality is we can any of us could find something else to do. But that's just it. We've been finding something else to do for far too long instead of doing what we needed to do. And so now it's time.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to challenge the audience to go and look at Reconstruction in South Carolina was because in the seat of power, in the State House, they managed to do something that was, at that point in time, you might as well say it was a major miracle, because all of a sudden, even with fracturing the vote and voter suppression and the threat of being beaten, those people did what they needed to do to have a seat at the table. So much so, the only way they could stop it was to rewrite the whole Constitution for the state. And so we're not, you know, I think it came up right after the death of George Floyd. People were asking me why I was silent. I mean, it's hurtful that in 2020, in the work that we do to advocate on behalf of those who can't advocate for themselves, that we are still having the same exact conversation. We got to have different outcomes this time around.
Yeah. You know, I can relate to that because we did get that question a lot. That's why are you guys so quiet on this issue? I got the question about young man Brooks, I think Rashad Brooks, I believe it was, in Atlanta, and you know, just same thing, why we were so quiet. And I think sometimes you literally have no more words, right? I am unapologetically sick and tired of having that conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's like Groundhog Day. It's just over and over again. It's like we get up, we replay it. We get up, we replay it. We get up, we replay it. And to have so many back to back to back to back, it's demoralizing sometimes. But I think in those times when you feel like that, you've got to go in that quiet space and you got to talk to history, and you got to get the energy and the motivation and inspiration from the past to help you propel forward to the future. And I think that's what we've done. So sometimes don't take the silence to mean we don't care. Trust me, the silence simply means we're trying to go into the war chest and go back into those ages of wisdom and get something so we can make a difference and do our small part. And so I think that's what I would challenge all of us to do. And so you have friends, you have circles, have those conversations. Listen, let me just tell you this. There's nothing tough about having a conversation about race. Have the conversation. You are both, every party in the conversation will be better for it. I learn a lot from my other brothers and sisters, and they learn a lot from me. But if we don't have the conversation and we just skirt around it, that's the same stuff that's got us into this mess. We got to deal with it. Have the conversation. And
have the conversation.
And then come up with a plan. What you gonna do? Leave that conversation with a plan of action.
Come up with a plan. And one of the things that I saw that really touched me is, again, the young people. Not only are they raising their voices in a unified fashion, but they're putting solutions on the table. And they're going for it. That's all. I mean, if you remember back to 1990, 1991.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're going because you took me right back to the tower.
That was us.
Yes.
Little known fact of Jackson State history is we felt like they were oppressing our voices. And Leslie, myself, it was quite a few of us across campus. We sat down.
And think about this. Here's what I'm most proud of. The catalyst that started that whole movement was a book club.
That's right.
That we were both part of. It was a book club, and we were we were broke in college. I'm just gonna let you know. So none of us could afford to buy all the books we wanted to read. So that's where the book club was started, because it was a way for us to share the books. So we all bought a book, and then we would share the books. So by the time you got through the year, you had read, 40 books, 50 books, because it was like 60 of us in the book club. And I mean, when I say people didn't miss, it was those kind of passionate meetings. But that was the catalyst that helped us organize and push our Student Government Association to get on board and take action.
That's right. Because sometimes your leaders are punks. Just call it what it is. You know what I'm saying? So if that's the case, then you have to let them know, one, you will be held accountable with the vote. Two, you have to give them articulate demands. And so I didn't mean to end up in the Wayback Machine, but give them a recap of what we did, Leslie, because it is an example of what's happening now.
Yeah, and so it was a situation where we had an interim president come in. We had a town hall meeting, and let me just say, before they announced, there was a panel of people they were considering. We had researched them all, we talked about them all, we had voiced our concerns and sent it up to the IHL at the time. They never responded to us, never responded to our issues or concerns. They picked the worst candidate they could possibly pick, one that we absolutely were adamantly opposed to. And so when that gentleman, who looked like me but didn't talk like me, arrived on campus at the first town hall meeting, we hit him with a series of questions, and he got so frustrated because it was facts. We had done the research, knew the facts, and we were holding him accountable to it, that he literally lost his cool, his temper, right? And went off. So
all pre-internet.
Pre-internet. This is pre-internet.
Yeah.
And so at this time, they're going to appoint him anyway, and we organized for the first week he was there. We organized secretly. Here's the key: secretly, we have every facet of our campus involved. Every sport, every choir member, every athlete, the band, everybody was involved and had a role to play. It was very organized, very disciplined. And at a certain time on that magical day, we all disappeared out of classes and took a stance and did a peaceful protest. But when I say it was peaceful, but it was definitely painful. And so painful to them because it was so peaceful you couldn't attack us. And yet we even had organized security. We had our vendors selected that we would get food brought in from. We even we would only talk to one media person, which was a Jackson State alum. So only one news station could get the coverage and get inside the building. And you're talking about a whole campus at that time. One mission, one goal. We won the battle. We won that one. And we got a permanent president appointed that went on to do great things. But I will tell you the feeling of knowing, because before that moment, I thought one person couldn't change anything. That's really what I felt. But after seeing what we were able to do, just 50 or 60 people in a book club, of all things, to be the catalyst to now we have thousands of us. And we had to be the voice because the faculty couldn't be the voice because they could just fire them. Can't fire your students. So we knew we had the power and the leverage. And so we did that sit in and we went in at 11 a.m. I'll never forget that day. That was the day of shutdown. We didn't leave till after midnight when they met our demands. So it was a magical moment. It was pre-internet. And I don't even know how we did that, but it was our version of the boycott in Montgomery. I mean, and it was literally people that were passionate about we're gonna do this the right way, and passionate about these are our demands. This is why, and this is what we must have. And so I applaud that. That was when I knew, and that's what I talk about evolving. You have to evolve. And so this generation is taking that. I think for us, and I'm talking to Generation X right now, and I don't care if you're white, black, or green. If you're in Generation X, I'm talking to you. We have laid down.
Not all of us.
Not all of us, but as a majority, we were focused initially, but we have laid down because we got comfortable. And then now we see where we are. We kind of dropped the torch. So if you look at historically, the baby boomers, we know where they were we know what their movement was. It was the whole civil rights movement. That was their movement. When you look at Generation X, what was our movement?
Got caught up on that technology, baby.
We were the dot-commers. We didn't have a cause. We didn't come together and unite. And so that's the difference. And so now it's exciting to see the millennial generation and the Generation Z doing their thing. So, and the thing that's beautiful about that, they're combined. They are global and they are powerful. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you letting me do a little history every now and then, Leslie.
Yeah, and look, here's Willie Mae's coming right here. She said, we stopped teaching history.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we stopped. I think we never started. But I will put my plug on HBCUs. If you go to HBCU, you will get some history. At least back in the days when we were going, you got it.
It's still a magical place. It is still a magical place.
Yeah. I think that's our message today. It's really a message to challenge us all to remember that we have an obligation. It's not a privilege. We have an obligation to speak to the people that we have influence over. We have an obligation to teach and educate. We also have an obligation to listen. And we definitely have an obligation to take action.
Right. And so with that in mind, we're going to switch gears for just a few minutes. We talked about Reconstruction. We talked about the direct lines to today. But we also have sandstorms, Angry Birds, and Corona. Mississippi hit 1,000 cases in one day. Dr. Dobbs is losing hair and sleep and worried about Mississippi becoming the next New York, because we failed to wear masks, we failed to stop socializing, we're not practicing social distancing. And as excited as I may be about the Southwestern Athletic Conference becoming a mega HBCU conference and destination spot for Black college football, we're not going to see that football if we don't do our part in being conscious of our surroundings, staying home, and staying out of the way until we can bend the curve. Because when they started doing these phases, we went from phase 1 to phase 100 all in one day. And now we see outbreaks in Florida, Mississippi, Texas, Arizona. So you gotta be on your smarts, people. This is the time to take action of staying home and keeping everyone safe, because you may be asymptomatic. We know we're not doctors, but we can read the virus is changing symptoms again. So, you know, and then when I read that Mississippi is at full capacity in its ICU,
yeah, that's scary. That's scary. That's really scary.
People. Come on, let's do this. We got to do it.
Well, we do. And for those of you that, you follow us, you know that I'm in Texas most of the time. Charles is in Mississippi. We used to go back and forth. We hadn't been able to see each other since Corona started. So we hadn't been back and forth. But here in Texas, we were one of the most aggressive states, right with Mississippi. And we started out the gate. And so the governor just announced today that now we're going backwards. So now he has no more elective surgeries. He's closed all bars. He's closed no water rafting, any of that stuff. And he's reduced restaurants' capacity back down to 50%.
You're talking about Governor Abbott?
Yes. Mm. The reality is, we moved too quick, and everybody knew it. And so now we're paying the price for that. But I will let you know, I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be in my house, going out only when I just absolutely have to, spending a lot of time in the backyard, and doing that type of thing. So for us, just know, but be safe more than anything. And I had a mentor tell me once, he said, common sense is not always common, but I want you to use common sense. And the reality is, I'd rather you wear a mask, even if you hate them. I'd rather you wear a mask and reduce the chances of either spreading or being infected than not wearing a mask and taking that chance. I would rather that. And so let's do that. And let's think about others. This virus now is not just affecting one type. It's affecting kids. It's affecting every age group. We have to be responsible to each other and how we handle it. We just can't be careless. And as far as football season and the mega conference, as far as what the SWAC is doing and what the potential could be, you can't get excited about it, because here's the reality, guys. With the way we're going now, I don't see a football season. Just my opinion. Or I'll put it this way. They can have one. I won't be there.
Either way, it won't be what it should be, because we're not doing what we're supposed to do right now.
Yeah. And so, hey, Mama. Let's see, Mama popped in. So, I don't know. Willie Mae said Jackson versus Madison. I don't know, Willie Mae, what you meant by that. So give us a little bit more info on that one. Any last comments, Charles, as we get ready to close out and encourage everybody to have a safe weekend? Listen, here's my disclaimer. Now, I don't know, some of you might have been following the national story that came out of Dallas, where I am. There was a family. They just had to have this party. 19 family members are affected with COVID because of one person.
All but two. Now tell them what the two did.
And two didn't go. The reason why the two are not infected is because they refuse to go, and they begged and they pleaded with their family members not to go. They went, and they are all infected with COVID-19. And so, look, we have to take precautions. We have to take precautions. So I want to be able to see you. I want to be when this is over one day. I want to be able to be in the same room and talk to you again. But until then, let's be safe so that we can have every opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Charles?
Yeah. So this is what I'm going to say. The Mississippi state flag needs to come down. It does not need to be a referendum vote by popular vote. It was put in place by the legislature. The legislature needs to take it down today, tomorrow, the next day. It's coming down, so go ahead and do it. Everybody's hip to the game of delaying it and putting it off on the voters. It's your job. We elected you to do the business of the state. Go do it. Downward pressure. Meanwhile, while that's going on, while we're having bad storms and all types of stuff related to climate change, a brief was filed in the Supreme Court to gut Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act.
I saw that. Striking down two of the premises, right?
Right. So basically, if we just put this in short form, because I know we're running out of time, they now do not want to take care of individuals with pre-existing conditions. Mm-hmm. And so basically what that says to me, and this is one man's opinion, is that the insurance lobby has influenced the federal government powers that be to try and take away your health care because they don't want to pay for your health care. Think about that. Insurance companies don't want to pay for your health care.
But they want your premium.
Indeed, sir, they do. So what I would say is, right now you got to have attention to many different fronts because you got to be safe because of Corona. You got to wash your hands, wear your mask, social distance, stay home. But you also have to be active and engaged in what's going on in your communities. Meaning you got to prepare for the vote in November. Because we see now Kentucky, since we talked about South Carolina, I'm going to talk about Kentucky for 10 seconds. Jefferson County, one polling place. Unacceptable. So that means, I told y'all months ago that they were going to do this. So that means you need to be requesting your ballots so that you can vote in the comfort of your home and get it back in. Otherwise, you're going to be in line for 8, 9, 10 hours. And what if they cut the line off if they figure out they may be losing? I'm not advocating for any party, but what I'm saying is you have a franchise, exercise it. But this year, you've got to be very, very particular about how you exercise that franchise. Find out your local rules and get it done.
I love it. I love it.
Everybody be safe and enjoy your weekend.
With that being said, we are now officially out of time, but we do want you to enjoy your weekend. We do want you to be safe. And we certainly want you to take all precautions. Until next time, enjoy.
Leslie and I have known each other since early childhood. We grew up on the same country road in Mississippi.
I think why we're good for the community of Mississippi is because we're a product of this community. We are just two country guys, and we were embedded with what I call the diamonds of good character.
Come, join the family, and help us build the community.